again, get involved in this. I want to remind you of what we're going to do next time, which is next Monday. We're going to read Foucault in here, and so it might be confusing because the Foucault comes in two parts. So I just want to tell you, the first part is from 135 to 169 of Discipline and Punish. You don't need to know that. It's in the sort of complicated because in the numbers of the reader, it's 43 to 60. Anyway, that you can see it's a stopping place. Then there's another thing from Discipline and Punish, and it's a short thing. It begins on 62, but that first paragraph on 62 you can cross out. That's left over from the previous thing. What I want to talk about is this brilliant thing Foucault wrote about what an examination is, and which is a very peculiar invention of relatively recent time in the world, but we all take it for granted. So anyway, so that for Wednesday read that first chunk. For next Monday read the first chunk, and for Wednesday read the examination part. Now, let's go to what we're talking about today. So, I was sort of surprised when I tried to figure out how to talk about this, that Heidegger is really unclear, utterly unclear about what interests us, which is the essence of the modern technology and postmodern technology. So I just have to give you all I'll lay out the unclarity of it. I was unclear, and that was partly my fault, but it wasn't altogether my fault. It certainly was a large part he hasn't got it together. And that's not surprising, of course, because he's living at a time when modern is going over into postmodern, and lots of changes are happening, and continuity is there too. I'll try to explain all that. And what I hope this will do is help you with the paper you're going to write, so that you won't think that you should just be doing Heidegger exegesis and trying to read the text over and over until you find a coherent view in it. If somebody does that, I will be delighted. Maybe there is a coherent view in it, and I'm missing it. Heidegger is, after all, the most important philosopher of the 20th century. He's very likely to have a coherent view. However, when you're facing something which hasn't gelled yet and isn't coherent yet, you can't really have one. So there are two sort of aspects of it. One is what he's very clear about, and what I talked about mostly last time, and what I'm not going to talk about again, is the talk about what a mode of revealing is, how it fits in the history of modes of revealing in the West, that we've got a new one, which is completely new and different. That he says very clearly. And what he doesn't say clearly is what the defining features of the new mode of revealing are. And so, when he says clearly that the big risk is we're going to be turned into standing reserve, whatever that is, we don't really understand very clearly what bad thing is going to happen to us, because we don't understand very clearly what it is to be standing reserve and turned into it. So that's what I want to talk about today. And the way I want to do it is something like, I hope, an illustration of how you should think about your papers. In Heidegger, it's always important to pay attention to what the phenomena is. Usually he's got a very clear grip on what the phenomena is, and all you have to do is find it, and then you can understand everything else he says in terms of it. In this case, he hasn't got a firm grip on it because it's not firm and grippable yet. So you have to sort of make up your own story about what the phenomena is and go further than Heidegger. And that's what I'm going to try to do. After all, we're standing on his shoulders, both indebted for his whole way of thinking about things, and we've got a 50-year, half a century has gone by where it must have gotten clearer what the unique understanding of being, or understanding what technicity is, or it better have. And so we can go further, and you should be paying more attention to describing the phenomena and asking yourself the question which I've been asking myself, and just where in this story does efficiency fit in, and what is it? I think Heidegger's got it in here, but I don't think he thinks it's the central phenomenon. But and then one more thing I want to say, I discovered as I wrote this, and I sort of knew it, but I kind of proved it to myself. We don't know what the distinction between modern and postmodern is, because it's just something people made up about a generation ago, and everybody knows something new and important is happening, and that the modern is not what it used to be, and whatever's going on, we might as well call it postmodern. And I decided as I looked at the phenomena, I don't think it's something gradual exactly, though, well, it is gradual in one way. I mean, more and more of our practices get taken over from being modern to being postmodern, and therefore that's gradual. But I think there are also sort of various distinct stages. This isn't anything you can just go out and find by looking around at your house or your friends or the news or anything, that I think you could probably, at least I'm going to try, to separate out 5 different stages that things have gone through, that our practices have gone through, as we went from, let's say, technology to technicity, if that doesn't confuse you, from modern technology to postmodern technicity. So to start with, I will do something I love to be able to do in lecture, admit that I was wrong, and take back at least, I don't think it's a good lecture unless I could take back at least 10% for what I said in the previous lecture, and if I've been shown wrong for 20%, that's even better. I'd say here maybe 20%, because I think it's a big mistake to translate Bestand, this word that gets translated standing reserve, by resources. That's what Ken and Force each independently were worrying about, and maybe what you discussed. Did you discuss this in discussion section?
Yes.
I thought you would, and it'll be interesting to see what my now current take on it is now lined up with yours, or whether we disagree in some new way. Okay, so we have to talk about why resources is a misleading translation, and maybe standing reserve is the best we can do. Though I keep giving you interesting problems for your papers, which if you solve them, I want to see the papers, and you will get an A+. I mean, one of them is, what did I say one of them was already? I told you one. Oh, to find out which of these features is the essential feature, if there is one that binds all the others together. So you can say, well, technicity is basically this, and that's why it gets this effect, and then you can list all my 5 as derivatives. That would be a super A+ paper. And the other question is, what's the right translation of Bestand? If resources is wrong, and I think standing reserve is pretty good, but not, it doesn't grab me. It doesn't connect up with any ordinary use we have. It doesn't point out anything very clearly that we normally point out. Maybe that's inevitable, because the understanding of being, the mode of givenness is hidden, remember, with draws, like the light in the room. It's not something that we normally think about, talk about, and have language for describing. So Heidegger certainly makes up Bestand as, it's a word running around, but he gives it a new use. And maybe we just have to take standing reserve, and it's a phrase you could have, and give it a new use. But if anybody has a better terms, I'd love to see them. Okay, let's talk about what's wrong with resources now. I said I would sort of repent what I said. Well, I think typical resources would be something like coal and minerals. And what is characteristic of them? Well, they're objects of sorts, not this kind of object, but they're stuff that you can, and we as subjects can find them and mine them and use them for satisfying our desires and so forth. With coal, it's the best example. We dig it up and we control it, and we use it. And what's nice about coal, and what makes it look like, this is all resource talk, subject-object talk, by the way. I'm trying to say what it is to be a resource and why it's wrong. Why it's wrong is it's not standing reserve. It's not any candidate for postmodern. It's just coal is good old modern thing, like railroads and bridges and solid stuff like that. You dig it up, and it has basically one use. I mean, you use it to heat things. I mean, then you can use the heat to do various things. You can generate electricity, or you can heat a house or with coal, but it's pretty limited in what you can do with it. And I think, I don't know if this is important. These are all sort of overtones of the word resources that makes it seem wrong. One is that it's got only one use. The next is that it's something that you can use up. I mean, I think that's really in our sense of resources. We worry about coal and oil. Oil I didn't use simply because it's more flexible than coal and probably easier to dig up. But it's got this feature that coal has, and I think when we hear resources, that it's something you can use up. And that's tied in with this phrase, the world becoming a gigantic filling station, that Heidegger uses that when he talks to the peasants. I mean, that's a resource kind of language, I think. That's partly his fault. I mean, if maybe that's too much like there's some kind of stuff which has one use, mainly in that filling station, gas, and we dig it up and we use it up. That's all the wrong associations to have. And another way to see why it's wrong is he mentions atomic energy. Atomic energy is not a resource. We don't find it lying around and dig it up. We've got to produce it, and we don't think we're going to run out of it. And now that's important, I think. There are others. I think the wind and the sun aren't resources for the same reason. You don't find them as sources of energy anyway. You don't find them just lying around, and you're not going to run out of them. And I think so is the Rhine River really like that, not a resource. But maybe the Rhine River is not a resource in a different way, because he certainly thinks that the Rhine River has been turned into standing reserve. So what happened there? What makes if the Rhine River is standing reserve, then I suppose the wind and the sun and atomic energy are all of them not resources, but all of them something else. And now we have to talk about what else. And I made a list of things here. Okay, so first, the standing reserve stands by for us to use it, and there's no danger of using it up. And a neat example that he gets into with the power station on the Rhine is electricity. It doesn't serve just some specific purpose, and it has many uses. It stands by, in a flick of a switch, you can use it for heating or lighting or radio or all sorts of things. And it can be stored and switched around ever anew. All that's in the discussion of electricity that comes in when he discusses the power station on the Rhine. And yet I think that somehow there's something wrong with this story about Heidegger's. I don't know quite what to say. It's awfully close to resources. I'm making a big effort to distinguish it, but I think it's still in the subject-object world. You make electricity, you control it, you use it to satisfy our desires. Now it's true, it's a stage beyond coal and the natural resources that we can use up. I mean, once you get a power station on the Rhine, you get endless electricity and endless power. But I don't think, and we'll come back to this in a minute, that we challenge it forth. We don't challenge the Rhine River forth to make electricity. I think that one wants to say, we do control it, we secure it, there's another phrase that's very important to me. We regulate it, and that's still not the essence of technicity. I'm going to call that, I don't know what to call it. I guess I call it sort of stage one standing reserve. And I'm going to try to distinguish it now from stage two. that, well, no, I'm going to merge it with stage 2. I keep changing my mind about these stages. Now I'm going to back up. I really don't know where to draw the line here. But in talking, I see I drew it differently and probably more how I want to do it. I think that this is all part of stage 1 of standing reserve. Everything I said about electricity. Because we use it for multiple things, and it's up to us to give it these various uses which we come up with. And I think the important phrase, that's what I just realized sort of walking over here, and I realized that Heidegger is very much hooked on this, is regulating and securing. And I think that fits perfectly for the way you deal with electricity. And there's the regulatory people who control it and tell you what voltage you can use and how you have code for how you have to wire it around and all that. That seems to me to be a characteristic of the most nearly like resources, most nearly like the subject-object modern, but already on the way to something different. But it's not the most important, I think, at all. But I just want you to realize that Heidegger seems to think it is the most important. That's what struck me. I think I put it at the end of my paper, my notes here. I was going to jump to it later, way later, toward the end. Well, I can find it again. When he finally sort of comes around to saying one thing about standing reserve on page 27, in framing, which we haven't talked about yet, but just never mind for the moment, about 6 lines from the bottom, where in framing holds sway, and framing is what turns everything into standing reserve, where in framing holds sway, regulating and securing of the standing reserve mark all revealing. And that's his bottom line, I guess. I mean, it looks like having sort of tried all sorts of things, which I'll go through. When the chips are down, the one thing he sees clearly. Are you going to say something?
No, I was
Be great.
to clarify, you're saying that he thinks that that's the most important step towards technicity?
No, sorry, I was not clear at all. That's because I jumped ahead in my lecture, and maybe I shouldn't have. I mean, I think that we've come across now what I think is the... Yes, that's your question. Okay. Yes, I think Heidegger thinks that the essential feature of technicity is that it's the sort we regulate and secure everything. He says everything is now standing by as standing reserve, that's a pretty strong sentence. Regulating and securing of the standing reserve mark all revealing. Okay, now I want to say, no, that's the one he's likely to see, because that's the one that's most like modern standing reserves, and that's the one he's going to talk about a lot, like when he talks about electricity, and that's what I was so hooked on last time. I mean, they always talk about electricity and how it gets switched about and so forth, but I now think even being switched about isn't the important thing for him. The bottom line for him is that we control it and regulate it and secure it. And that's not very interesting, it seems to me. There's a lot more interesting stuff going on in the postmodern world, wherever it starts and however you define it, than hydroelectric plants and making electricity. I mean, maybe that was a big deal 50 years ago. I think that was an old technology even 50 years ago. Does anybody know enough about that? When was with TVA and when was the Tennessee Valley Authority and all that? I would have thought in the first half of the last century.
It was 30s. Yeah.
30s, okay. So it's even more than 50 years old, and so that might have been the technicity for him. That's a big deal, making a big dam like in the Rhine and making electricity. But it's not where it's at now, I think. And getting closer is the idea that we, in some way, don't just control what's going on, but we exploit it. That's getting closer to what he wants. He tries to do that with the Rhine River, but it doesn't work very well. It's the crucial phrase that's supposed to explain what's special about our relation to the standing reserve is that we challenge it forth. Remember that. And he tries to tell us, I'm not convinced, that we challenge forth the Rhine River into a source of electricity. And he's telling you that on 16. He talks about 5 lines down. In the context of the interlocking processes pertaining to the orderly disposition of electrical energy, even the Rhine itself appears as something at our command. This is the controlling again. And skipping. What the river is now, namely a water power supplier, derives out of the essence of the power station in order that we may even remotely... Oh yeah, I'm going to stop for that a minute. That's just the same point. And the idea is, I think, though he doesn't spell it out, that we turn the Rhine River into a source of energy. That's what challenging forth amounts to. We decide that that's what we want it to be, and we make it that. But it's also, and he's clear, that it's also, for the tourist industry, the Rhine River is something to go visit and go down on boats to see the beautiful scenery, which it is. And that's another way we challenge it forth as a scenic tourist attraction. And of course you can add, and we challenge it forth, and why he doesn't mention it is because they've been doing it for 2,000 years or so. It's a means of transportation. And of course it's got fish in it. That's an old one too. He's interested in the new one, challenging it forth, which is not its natural tendency, as a tourist attraction and as a source of electricity. And that's all very well, but I think that's what that lacks in my view, and I think it lacks in his view, but he hasn't sorted it apart, is another form of challenging forth. It doesn't sound very challenging forth, you see. It sounds to me like what the right way to describe it is, that we can use the Rhine in various ways, see it from various perspectives. It's like a multiple object for a multiple subject. I mean, the subjects who are tourists can see it as scenery, and the subjects who are using it to make electricity can see it as energy. That's interesting, but I don't think it's what we do more than that. Although he says, and this is what I wanted to mention too, the middle of 16 is interesting. After he says that we challenge forth the river as a water power supplier, you might want to say, well, what's so bad about that? An electricity supplier, well, why not? And a tourist attraction, fine. And let's keep traveling on it and fishing in it too. And I don't find anything to get upset about. But he, though I don't think he explains why, claims it's monstrous in the middle of 16. In order that we may even remotely consider the monstrousness that reigns here, let us ponder for a moment the context of the speech. And then he talks about poets and how for the poets the Rhine was not an object, and it wasn't taken over by the vacation industry. Okay, big deal, but I'm just not convinced that that's monstrous. Something monstrous does happen. Not there, but in the next example. His next example is much better for him, only he doesn't live in contemporary California, or he'd see how much better it is. What it really is a good example would be agribusiness. Then you could understand the sense in which we're doing violence to the Central Valley, and that there is something monstrous about that. That is, we're forcing it to produce. And I think that's the next... I'm going to, just a second, catch up with myself. Yeah, let me back up a bit. I think if there's anything monstrous, he's clear that it's not that bad things will happen. He thinks we can fix all that. If there's something monstrous, it's a mode of this mode of revealing things as multiple objects to satisfy our multiple purposes is no longer nurturing. It's no longer bringing forth. We're not interested in bringing forth the Rhine at its best, which the poets understand. And therefore this old mode of revealing, which somehow was more in tune with things and with our nature, is being wiped out. That's monstrous, I guess, but we need better examples. Yeah.
Would you say that instead of nurturing it, it's subjugating it?
Yes,
Yeah.
but not quite. But you're good. You're getting ahead of my story. But that's the right place to be. I think exploiting it, subjugating it, dominating it, those are the next stage, and they're bad. I don't think of somehow. It's hard for me to picture the power station and the tourists exploiting the Rhine, dominating the Rhine. What was your word? Subjugating the Rhine. But I think you can definitely think that about the way we deal with the Central Valley, where we force things beyond their nature to exploit them, dominate them. Again, I keep forgetting your word. Subjugate them, and we do it in order to enhance them. But still, I mean, we put in fertilizer, pesticides, genetic engineering. We make it, the Central Valley, stand by as ordered by us, for us. We're not nurturing the crops. We're trying to bring them totally under our control, get them out from under the seasons, the insects, the weather, which seems to be not in our control, and make them give out what is there to optimize. That's where we connect up with the Course. I mean, we want to get, Heidegger does see that, but he doesn't see how important it is on the middle of 15, that we want maximum yield at minimal expense. I hope that jumped out at you. How many of you, as you read through this Murphy thing, suddenly felt that you knew why we assigned you and what was going on? You have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm interested in the use of the terms natural tendency with respect to the Rhine River, and also like different degrees of subjugation or forcing or regulating or controlling, because it seems to me like that would be in contradiction to the essence of technology or postmodernism with respect to the idea that like the truth of the object is the affirmation of whatever the subject says it is, rather than like that the Rhine River actually has a certain natural tendency, which is to bring forth fish.
Okay, well, I don't think we're disagreeing. That's the poesis view of the Rhine, was that it had a natural tendency. That's the first thing. We can all agree about that, maybe.
Why are we speaking about it?
Why are we speaking about it now?
Yeah.
Only because, and it isn't in my notes, I just threw it in. You guys are keeping me to the straight and narrow. But he contrasts it. You get the feeling, I believe, that he thinks that this nurturing practices that we once had were on to something. That things that somehow the right way to deal with the vegetables and so forth is to help them grow, but not to force them to go beyond what they would normally do. We protect them from, the peasants know what to do. They protect the vegetables from the weather, but they don't go around genetically engineering them to not be hurt by the cold, and they don't have monoculture, so they don't have to use pesticides. I mean, this is a familiar thing. You let things do what they're trying to do, and you bring out what they do to bring them out at their best. That idea is the idea that I think is definitely pre-modern. That's what I want to answer. It's not even, it isn't even in the postmodern business. I mean, it's not in the postmodern business. It's not even in the modern business. It's not in the business of controlling and securing and regulating, which is the beginning of the postmodern. And it's certainly not digging things up like coal and just, okay. So that's what I want to say. But I'm not, why I almost didn't mention it. I mean, Heidegger doesn't give any argument here for why he thinks that nurturing is a better way to relate to reality than dominating and exploiting it and subjugating it. But he certainly does. He thinks, and I'll tell you why he does, but it won't, I think, be extremely zappily convincing or anything. I think that he thinks that our relation to the mode of revealing is now and always has been receiving something that we can't control and regulate and dominate. And that's our basic nature. That what's most important about us and reality is that it's our practices that do it, but our practices do it in a way that isn't under our control and even isn't under our understanding. Our practices are called by this mysterious something, which he calls that with a capital T in here somewhere. Did you notice that? That because he doesn't have any other name for it. But the ultimate reality is that something about which you can't say anything calls us to take on a certain mode of revealing, and that we have to be open and responsive and nurture even whatever mode of revealing comes along. That's his basic picture of our position in the world. And then now I put nurture in there on purpose. I mean, the nurturing attitude toward particular things in the world, which is a mode of revealing, is a mode of revealing which reveals more about our relation to modes of revealing than the more recent ones. I'll repeat that because that's a funny thing to say. I mean, if our normal relation to the various modes of revealing that are, quote, sent to us by that, later Heidegger talks about the it gives, where there isn't any it. We receive these modes of revealing, and we should be the preservers of them, and they have authority over us, and we can't control them and regulate them and secure them, let alone exploit and subjugate them. That's true of our basic relation to this reality. And that means that a particular mode of revealing, namely nurturing, is closer to and preserves more of that way of being human, the big deal way of being human, that we are receivers of modes of revealing no matter what. That if they have authority, we have to appreciate them, be thankful for them, preserve them. Even the technicity one, he thinks we should be appreciative of and thankful for. Because if we didn't have technicity or any other mode of revealing, we wouldn't have any revealing. And then it wouldn't be us, and we wouldn't have any experience. Well, let me just finish. So given that that's our basic way of being, to be receivers of and appreciators and preservers of modes of revealing, then the mode of revealing, which is the particular one which captures most of what our nature is the one that puts us in the position of nurturing particular things, crops and babies and rivers and so forth. Why? Because in the particular nurturing, we are, again, receiving something which we can't control and regulate if we're in the nurturing frame of mind or way of being. And that means that we have a sense of our receptive, grateful role in reality. And you all look various levels of confused and zonked out. Yeah, but his is such a good question. I don't want to throw it away. I'll keep talking about it until you either all lose your minds or understand it. You started it. Go ahead.
At the same time, when you say, like, I guess it's, which one is nurturing again? Is it poiesis?
Poiesis. Poiesis.
So if poiesis helps us better understand sort of where our relation to modes of revealing is, it seems to me that technicity does a very similar thing, because as human beings, if it is in fact that which is giving us new modes of revealing, we have to adapt. We are constantly under the subjugation and required to adapt to these new modes of revealing, and so it seems as though technicity is doing an even better job than poiesis at showing us this relationship.
That's interesting. No, but I have to see why no. He doesn't think of the modes of revealing as subjugating or dominating or exploiting us. They are, or even enhancing us, which seems a lot nicer, but is still part of the problem. They are enabling us to do the thing that is our nature to do, namely to be the receivers of and appreciators of understandings of being, they do, in a certain way, and you're not wrong, govern the way we relate to everything. And that makes it sound like, regulating and control. Why isn't it regulating and control? I have to think about it. It doesn't feel right to me, or to him, to think that, say, that when we're all under the subject-object modern way of looking at things, that we're being dominated or exploited by it. But we certainly are being, we are at the mercy of it. It's in charge, so to speak. And that's what you're on to. We have to be the receivers of it. I want to say something like, we're the receivers of it for our own good. By being receivers of it, we get to exercise our nature as world receivers and world disclosers, as preservers of modes of givenness. If that's what we really are, which is what he thinks, then they are sort of the other half of what we really are. They're sort of giving us the opportunity to be what we really are, which isn't supposed to sound dominating or exploiting, subjugating. That's the best I can say about it for the moment. Well, let's come back to it. But let me make it more now down to earth. I mean, his good question was, why is Heidegger a big fan of nurturing? And I tried to tell you it's sort of built into this basic view that we receive and nurture modes of givenness. But specifically, why is it monstrous for him what goes on in the Central Valley, say, which is a much better example, I think, than what goes on the Rhine? And the answer is, instead of bringing out the crops to do their own thing in the face of the seasons, together with other crops and so forth, that we try simply to make them produce the maximum yield at the minimal expense. That's not what they're there for. I don't know how to, it isn't whether God put them there or not. It's just plants. We know we're doing that. We know that we're sort of giving fertilizer to plants to make them do more than they would normally do, and we're giving them pesticides for that, and we'll genetically engineer them for that. That's the clearest case. Clearly, when you genetically engineer the plants to do what you want them to do, to be more resistant to bugs and more resistant to cold and more easy to pack and better looking and so forth, you're making them do what you want them to do instead of bringing out what they naturally do. That seems fair enough thing to say. Now, but your point was still well taken. And why shouldn't we? Well, now comes this point, because nurturing is more fitting with our nature and more fitting with their nature, and I think that's bottom line for Heidegger. Now let me go on. But I saw another hand. Yeah.
Well, there were two things. First, it seems like I was looking back at the memorial of that, and there he talks about calculative thinking versus meditative thinking. Meditative being more what our mode of revealing is, right?
Meditative thinking is thinking about what our mode of revealing is.
And then
that's what he does. He's a meditative. That's his job description, meditative thinking.
When you're talking about the standing reserve and all of that, it seems what I kept getting that maybe you're going there, but that he's talking about somehow it's gotten away from us. I mean, just this.
It never was in our control, though. We've got to be careful. The modes of revealing that have come over the culture, all 6 of them. I see they're lying on the floor right here. I don't know. Remember, reduces poesis, techne.
You can peel that off and stick it up.
Peel it off, stick it on the wall. Anyway, these modes of revealing, we didn't figure them out or plan them or make them happen or anything like that. They just got sent to us by that, which is the sender.
Like somehow what distinguishes what happens is, we're one foot in, one foot out, is this modern where we thought we were, we attempted to control.
That's right. We're getting out of that.
And then there's something else, and it's that all those concepts of enframing where it seems like there's sort of a process that process becomes more important than anything. But well, I should say more important. We're not aware of it. So that's what I mean by.
It becomes more our thing. A process is, keep it in mind. Maybe it's a name for something I'm going to talk about in a minute, but I'm not sure it is, so I don't want to put it in until we get there. But what I want to come back to is one of the things that we're certainly talking about right now, which is perhaps monstrous, and I think Heidegger thinks it's monstrous, is this business of not just letting come forth, which is the top one, or bringing forth, which is the second one, or even producing, like producing bricks, which is the third one. But what's monstrous is trying to make everything yield the ultimate amount of whatever. It's the Taylor stage, I think. And I therefore think that Taylor has already got one foot in challenging forth. I mean, he's not treating things as resources. He's going to make them better and make them produce more. The crucial phrases are on page 15. The top, the work of the peasant does not challenge the soil of the field. In the sowing of the grain, it places the seed in the keeping of forces that watch over its increase. That's what I've just been saying. But meanwhile, the cultivation of the field has come under the grip of another kind of setting in order, which sets upon nature. It sets upon it in the sense of challenging it. Agriculture is now the mechanized food industry. That was the whole reason I went into the agribusiness thing. But then he generalizes it into efficiency or maximum yield. The setting upon that challenges forth the energies of nature is an expediting. Imagine that. That's the word that we come across, Galbraith's word, right? Gilbert's word. Yeah. Okay.
I love that it has a German. In German, it's Ford. It has a Ford resonance related.
Further on. I don't think anybody who knows German will hear that, but if you do, that's fine. It doesn't mean Fordizing. Right. It's an old German word. The expediting in two ways. It expedites in that it unlocks and exposes. Yet that's still not, of course, the essence of what Gilbert and what am I thinking? Taylor are doing. Yet that expediting is always itself directed from the beginning towards furthering something else, toward driving on to the maximum yield at the minimum expense. And when you get to there, you've gotten to Taylor. And whether you call that, and I take it, that's supposed to be technicity. And it's supposed to be what we've been calling postmodern. That's what's so, I mean, that's why I worry more and more that trying to classify these things in terms of modern and postmodern is going to be hard in the paper because it's such a slippery business. I think what you want is to do something like I'm trying to do. Just find the various ways that people have related to everything in our culture since modernity. And you can step by step see how they become more and more something very different. And a big step from modernity to this postmodernity, which is very different, somewhere halfway in between, I think, this transitional person is Frederick Taylor and Gilbreth and Ford, because they're making this expediting move to get more out of something that it naturally gives. That means optimize, and that's be efficient. And now, so much for that. Now what? This is all about forcing things beyond their nature. I think I've just covered it in talking to you about it already. Yeah, okay. But that's not what's really now new, I think. Heidegger only has glimmers of what's really new. I think what's really new is, and probably you could really call it postmodern, is that everything is pure flexibility. securing and regulating, remember we said this about Taylor and about Ford and so forth, is not flexible. It's fixed. You get the one best way, and you just do it. You get your production line lined up like in modern times, and then you just do it. You train your workers to do one thing, and they do it from morning till night and from birth to death. But I think that's what goes when you get to the next stage. I think a phrase that comes in handy, which Heidegger got from Nietzsche. Heidegger gets postmodernists from Nietzsche. Nietzsche is generally considered to have come up with a new understanding of being. Come up with is the wrong way to put it. Been sensitive to a new understanding of being, moving in on us, as Heidegger would put it. And that Nietzsche called it constant overcoming. And constant overcoming is not the same as domination and control. It's not the same as enhancing and optimizing. It's not even like what I said is our nature, which is getting the most out of your possibilities. That's how we become Taylorized. I don't think we have a name for that. I don't mean these are all variations of standing reserve. It would help to have a lot of different names for these variations of standing reserve. The kind where we challenge the Rhine to be some number of things is different than when we challenge the Central Valley to do something that it was never meant to do at all. And that's different again from what this thing is of getting the most out of your possibilities. That's a kind of efficiency too. But that isn't a fixed kind of efficiency. That's a flexible kind of efficiency. That's what leads, remember, parents to take their kids and to want to make them into musicians and basketball players and martial arts experts and ballet dancers and everything. That's trying to get the most out of your possibilities. I mean, maybe they haven't got all those possibilities, but the idea is to do that. Yeah.
In terms of like the minimum expense, I'm asking myself, minimum expense to whom and in what time frame? Because I think a lot of the problems with activism, and also I would disagree on the damming not being as bad, because it does have huge ecological effects on changing the ecological processes that are allowed to happen there, and they're not sustainable in the long run, at least large dams.
Good. I was going to talk about that and skipped it, so I'm glad you brought it in. Okay, well, let me say something about that parenthetically. I was going to talk about it only to say, notice that Heidegger isn't concerned about that. He doesn't, when he's worrying about the hydraulic thing on the Rhine, say anything about what it's done to the farms and the forests and everything around the Rhine. And that's because, and this is just a parenthetical, for better or for worse, Heidegger, as I keep saying, is a technological optimist. He thinks that on the level of technology, we can fix all the things we do wrong, and we'll make sustainable hydroelectric power, if you ask him. It doesn't have to be bad for the environment, he would say.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you would think about that.
Yeah.
But
So he's objecting on a philosophical or moral ground to the way that we're trying to sort of rein in nature. But, I mean, coming from the College of Natural Resources, like I see and study the ecological and the effects that kind of tie in more to the technicity and the challenging of the maximum yield to the minimum expense. Like that minimum expense is still a questionable.
I see what you're saying.
Sort of tacked on there, but I mean, it's like a lot of what we are doing is completely unsustainable in the long run and has a lot of expenses that aren't necessarily being paid by the people who are profiting from what they're doing.
that sounds right. I think he's blind to that. I think he thinks that it is really minimal expense, or if it isn't, it's because somebody's been greedy or stupid and it should be somehow doable. I don't know what he would think about strip mining, for instance. He'd probably say, oh, that was a bad idea. We shouldn't have done it. People were short-sighted, and we shouldn't be clear-cutting our forests either. But it's important, you put it, there's this moral objection, which is different than this sort of ecological, realistic objection. And he thinks, and that makes him so peculiar and different, that even if all the technological problems were fixed, technicity would still be doing something bad to us. But it's good for you to, point this out, because otherwise people think that he's a kind of anti-technology person, which there are plenty, and which there need to be plenty, and that's what you are telling us. But he's not. He's got his own very different agenda. And every once in a while it comes out, I underlined it, but I haven't, I think, put it into what I was going to say, where he'll say, yeah, there is that problem, but that's really not concerning us. Maybe I can find one of them. I thought, gee, yeah, that's typical of Heidegger. He thinks we don't have to worry about that. Well, I thought it would be weird about right here where the Rhine River gets dammed up. Well, I'm not going to find it. Let's go on. Yeah.
So you said that the last step, or like the true postmodernism, is everything as pure flexibility.
Yeah, I haven't explained it yet, but I said it.
But you have already differentiated it from the step before, which is trying to optimize the exploitation, like
Yes.
Taylor does.
Right.
I was wondering why you still tend to call that postmodern.
Okay, I think I do it really because I think it characterizes something new that we are more and more into that wasn't even part of whatever I call this transitional stage. It isn't subject-object for sure. It isn't securing and stuff for sure. And I think it isn't even maximum yield, because with that you could get the one best solution and just stick to it. It's change for its own sake. That's what Nietzsche's into, and that's what I think Heidegger later, when he reads more Nietzsche, gets more and more to think that constant overcoming is exactly where we're at, and that's a bad thing.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Can you, because there's 5 stages that you're talking about.
Right.
Could we write them very briefly? Just to
Oh, my 5 stages. I'm not even sure I've got 5 stages, but let's write them on.
Or
I
4?
think I've got 4.
But I would think it would just be helpful.
Yeah, why don't you, when you write them while I try to figure out
Yeah.
what they are?
We have
I keep changing my mind about where to draw the line.
What is it, the marker?
The marker, I carried it around for quite a while, but I may not have it now.
Anybody have a marker on it?
I don't have my marker anymore.
Okay.
So we don't have a marker.
You have one? Oh, perfect.
Oh, hooray.
Whoa.
No. It's a risky business.
I
There
don't
it
know
is.
where it was, but
That's all it says.
There's indelible ink all over.
Okay.
Okay.
Now let's do it. So there seems to be the resources, number one. That's the real, that's modern. Oh, it's great having you write it so people can see it.
Okay.
Okay, and now the next one is going to be, and then we don't even have a word for it already, but it's what happens to the Rhine when, we could call it challenging forth, except that there may be other kinds of challenging forth, but let's call it challenging forth, because that's certainly the way he seems to think about it, and what's monstrous about it is that the Rhine has to be all these things that it wasn't doing before.
What are these, the stages of technicity, or?
These are stages of technicity or toward technicity. I mean, maybe when we finish we can draw a line and say this is where technicity starts. I think it starts already. Challenging forth for him is a kind of technicity. So resources is well, of course
the coal and the
put that down. But of course for him it's all. See, he doesn't have the distinction modern, postmodern. It's all modern technology, he says. Modern, the word modern appears every once in a while, and he says it's all new, and the subject-object part of it is new. He sees that the subject-object part of it is not necessary, because he talks about how airplane on 17 on the runway is not an object. And so I guess what I want is, put resources, coal, subject-object, all that up there. Yeah.
subject-object?
Yeah. Maybe the next line. Subject, object, and all of that is modern. But but of course for him, now we have to decide what to do. For him, everything on this list is modern, and everything on this list is technicity. We've got a distinction called postmodern, and we want to say, okay, you can call all that technicity. That's fine because it's certainly something new.
Let's finish the list.
Okay,
and then
let's
we'll
finish the
then
list.
we'll find
Good,
out.
okay. So after challenging fourth, which is with the Rhine River issue, and maybe you should put that in. I mean, what I was trying to do when I wrote this is see how each of Heidegger's examples fits in here.
I mean, there are certain, even with the second one, there's still, you mentioned there was a certain play with subject-object, or multiple subjects and multiple objects.
That's what it seems to me, but maybe we shouldn't put it in there, I don't know. Let's not put it in there, because there's too many things in the air.
Down here, yeah.
Okay, so the third one is, I just had it now, I've lost it again. It's the exploiting one, I'm just trying to find where we...
Expediting or the...
Yes, expediting. Well, wait. Yes, expediting. Right, that's it. Getting maximum yield to minimum expense. And that's the agribusiness example.
So where does standing reserve fit into that?
For him, I mean, these are all various possible meanings of standing reserve, which he's got all mixed up together. When you turn the Rhine into electricity in the tourist industry, you're already doing standing reserve. When you even further exploit and dominate, that's the control. I mean, where we could put control and what's the other word? Regulate, but there's hardly room for it. But that's up here with the electricity, right?
This is electricity, okay.
Right. And so when you go beyond controlling and regulating to optimizing, then that's also standing reserve, but that's another kind. What we need is names for all these things. I don't think standing reserve is a very good name for any of them, but it's certainly not a good name if it covers such a diverse bunch. You needed subnames anyway, and I don't have them. But I had the main thing. What I'm illustrating is, at least, that when I think about it, I think about the sort of paradigm case examples. It's another way of saying the phenomenology of it. It may be better here. So the Rhine is a paradigm case of something or other because of the dam. The agribusiness is a paradigm case of this exploiting operating efficiency thing. Now we're going to look at paradigm cases of flexibility.
That's 4?
Yeah. So we got forcing things beyond their nature. We did that.
Actually, there's something, 3 is optimizing, right? But that's to its nature. Is there another stage that goes beyond its nature, or is that part of it?
Wait, say that again?
Well, in optimizing, there's an idea of optimizing it to its optimum point, and then there's the optimizing beyond its
That's
optimum
right.
point.
I agree. They could be distinguished. If they are, then let's see. Because what about Taylor now? Taylor thinks that he's finding people's true nature and then optimizing.
Here.
Yeah. These people are not optimizing the true nature, but beyond its nature.
Beyond
right. So let's separate them. Yeah.
So,
but isn't poiesis optimizing something to its nature? I thought that was
no.
bringing it out.
Not quite, but that's good.
Think of Taylor who just, it's like Taylor got
Right.
mad.
That's the next
It's
step.
modern times, actually,
Yeah.
right? It's optimizing beyond its nature.
Oh, wait a minute, I
bringing
see.
it up so far
I see.
that...
Right.
That sometimes it is. I see. In that case, optimizing behind it or beyond its nature is
Hyper-expediting or something.
okay. I see. Well, there's no more hyper-expediting. Agribusiness is already hyper-expediting.
Oh, okay.
That's what bothers me.
So maybe we move agribusiness down to 4.
Okay. Yeah.
This is just basically a production line. So I don't want to. I wish we had an eraser.
Yes.
The Green Revolution, but then there's also GMO, which is kind of like different. And like
Right.
the Green Revolution is more like optimizing.
Right.
GMOs is bringing
Hyper
components.
Okay. So
Can I try?
Yeah.
Hyper.
Because Taylor doesn't think he's exploiting people. He thinks he's finding their one talent and their one best way of doing things, and then they're just locked into that, and that's efficient because you're getting the most out of them, but you're not forcing them to do anything. You're not. That's the crucial difference. Forcing things. I don't think Taylor would think at all, and I think he'd be right to say, I'm not forcing things beyond their nature, like genetic engineering and pesticides and fertilizers. Yeah.
I have a little bit of an issue with the whole idea of beyond its nature.
You had that already, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and natural tendency and all that. I mean, if you had to just like consider, for example, like what about people in poiesis or physis or whatever, or techne, when they're creating these modes of revealing, I mean, what is it to even plant crops, where they didn't naturally fall or whatever?
Okay, well, we know what that's supposed to be.
Nature?
That's supposed to be on the level of physis, of course, and Heidegger would say, I think, that, he talks about poiesis here, and he says things are blooming forth, how does he put it? That's fine, but that is, you can help them. Physis is bursting open, belonging to bringing forth, the way the blossom, this is on the bottom of page 10. That's physis. And poiesis is hervorbringen, he says. That is, you bring things forth, presumably at their best. Now, you can call, each of them, when things burst forth in nature and so forth, that's fine, and that's their nature. But you can also cultivate it, and when you cultivate it, you help it come forth. That's his picture. But that's not like Central Valley. That's not just cultivating it. That's, according to him, pushing it to do something else. And I guess we could worry about it, but the idea of having monoculture and fertilizer and pesticide and genetic engineering, it certainly begins to look very different than the peasants. Okay, so we'll come back to it. I see that it's bothering you, and it might well.
I mean, this is an aspect that I seem to be kind of looking for, that doesn't seem to be showing up, is that something happens to the thing, that there's some sort of like alienation that happens during this process, and it seems like these different stages, one is showing this related to subject-object. There's a certain sense of alienation that's occurring to the thing through subject-object, through the metaphysical way of looking at things. And there seems to be a certain way of alienating the thing in a different way when you get down towards this hyper-expediting, where you actually I don't want to say nature of the thing, but the thing itself seems to not even be, it seems to be so...
There's this dominating, exploiting, subjugating thing, which is different than what we do with coal,
right,
or railroads and so forth.
Right.
Yes.
Which is another kind of alienation, but
we are already treating something as an object for subject is certainly not nurturing. You got to have some baseline, I think, to talk about this, and that's why nurturing keeps coming in. But subjects treating objects as ways of satisfying their desires and needs. In what we're going to read in Borgman, turning things into commodities, I think, is his way of describing it.
There's this aspect of, as far as this alienation, that within Taylorism, kind of is where it's kind of straddled on the subject-object. When it is object, it can't go outside of the bounds, so you can't extend it past its nature. Nature is already understood as fixed and projected, and it can't go past that. So it seems like with this pure flexibility, or going towards flexibility, the bounds of the object are not set, because it's not really...
That's right, they got no nature anymore.
No nature.
That's what he's going to be happy at that. The latest stage, you get rid of their having a nature.
Right.
It isn't you push them beyond their nature. You treat things as if they had no nature. I'll give you this great example, where Ken had this kind of aha when we said it. The perfect example of the next stage is the stem cell. It hasn't got any nature. It's ready to become brain or bone or whatever it is.
That was your idea.
What?
That was your idea.
That's true, but you got very happy with it. He recognized it was a good idea. So anyway, that's the next picture of flexibility. The stem cell is the perfect example of flexibility.
It's totally amorphous. It doesn't have...
That's right. It doesn't have a nature to bring out. It's ready. It's really standing by. It's really ready to be challenged for it by putting it in whatever context that you want it to be, something like bone or eye. It will be it. And what's interesting about that is, I mean, that should be what's so exciting to us right now, and what's so important to us, and what we're convinced is going to work and be a kind of panacea that's going to solve everybody's problems as far as their medical, bodily problems are concerned. And what Ken and I were discussing at lunch was, is this an illusion that it's going to be so important and solve all our problems? It might well be, because it is the thing that makes it look like we finally found something that reality is supposed to be. I mean, look at this. We find reality is really behaving the way it should behave, having no nature and standing by, ready to be whatever we want it to be, and the more the merrier. That it should be able to be just anything in the human body business. Let me say one more thing about it, Forrest, and then because I want to just not lose track. Oh yeah. Let me say one more thing. And it wouldn't be so interesting if it weren't that there are a whole list of things we came up with where it looked like they were going to be the great big deal important solution that the humankind was going to come up with, and then they fizzled. And it may be that this kind of optimism that something is going to come along that will be everything that we want it to be is part of this understanding of being that's what reality really is. I mean, the stem cell is just closer to reality than other stuff. Reality is just there waiting for us to challenge it forth to be whatever we want it to be. And I made a list of the things that have great promise and didn't come out. My interest when I was at MIT, and I wrote a book about it, was artificial intelligence. I mean, it looked like we're going to have robots that did everything. The head of the MIT AI lab actually told the people who made 2001 that we would have robots like HAL in 2001 that did everything we needed them to do, completely ran the mission and so forth. And this was an intelligent guy, Marvin Minsky. He really believed it. Why do intelligent people believe these things? Well, we think, maybe, it's because they've got this understanding now that sort of hyper-flexibility is what it's all about, and when anything comes along that seems to promise hyper-flexibility, they assume, of course, it's just what we need and it's going to work. So there's artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and the AI fizzled completely. As you know, there was no HAL in 2001, and there's not going to be any HAL in 3001 either, as far as I can see. Genetic engineering, I don't know whether it's a big deal, important thing, or a dangerous thing, or what. Nanotechnology is the next hype. We're going to find out that we can build anything out of the ultimate molecules, and they're just sitting around waiting for us to use them in every possible way to make everything better than anything we've got. I'm very suspicious of nanotechnologies. And now the puzzling thing about stem cells is, you didn't get a chance to ask any doctor yet, have you? We want to know whether the people who are really in the know think that maybe the stem cell thing is just another hype, that surely it'll do something. I mean, AI did something. It checks your credit cards. It knows that it's intelligent enough to know that you can't buy things both in New York and in Washington, in San Francisco at the same time. And it says help when you do that, if your credit card does that. I mean, there was a minimal amount of intelligence around, but it certainly didn't turn out to be HAL. And now, how much stem cells really can do, I have no idea. But if this list is right, they may turn out to be another sort of illusion caused by our current mode of givenness, that we think this is how reality is, and happily how it ought to be, and therefore that's how it must be, and then it turns out it doesn't work that way. That's our little thing from lunch. Now, Forrest, yeah.
I was just going to say, I think stem cells is playing, as a biologist.
Yes, that's right. We got to somebody. Is it a good story?
No, I think it is not a good story.
That's what we hope.
And for several reasons. First of all, stem cells are fascinating this way because you're really cultivating stem cells. Stem cells have an intrinsic nature because they have the DNA, and you're simply directing the possibilities of that DNA. It's not infinitely flexible. Depends which stem cells you're talking about. But to the extent to which they become whatever they are, every cell in the body has the same DNA. And it's a matter of the body cultivating that DNA with respect to where it's located and such. So you could really think about stem cells as cultivation in Heidegger's sense. You're bringing out their true nature in different directions, because all of these possibilities have to do with the DNA and the possibilities of the DNA, which are already there. That's why they're stem cells, because the possibilities are already there. They're not just infinitely flexible.
But that's funny. I mean, I don't disagree with any of that, but the picture is that we're stuck with it all by the time we're, I guess, born already, or just zoomed, born. We've got, all these cells have already been decided on. I mean, they're either going to do their bone thing, or their eye thing, or their liver thing.
Whether it's an embryonic stem cell or an adult stem cell.
Well, there are adult stem cells.
Oh, of course, because your immune system, you have stem cells. That's the whole bone marrow idea. That if you have leukemia or something, you can replace those stem cells.
I thought they would just be bone marrow cells.
No, bone. Well, the point is, bone marrow cells are a kind of adult stem cell.
But they can't. Bone marrow cells can't be eyes and.
No, not eyes. That's the point. They're limited. The embryonic stem cells can become that. But the whole idea is all the genetic content is there. All we have to do is find out how to revert those, and that's what happens in cancer. Early on in development, cells move around, and that possibility of movement remains there. And metastasis in cancer is simply a reversion of those cells, such that they start moving around. So this is a much more complicated story with stem cells. I don't think it's a good example of this kind of ultimate flexibility, that's all.
Well, I guess what we're saying is, and I think we're recognizing that we're not experts in such concepts, but I think there's a pattern that we suddenly saw at lunch, this idea that there is this pattern where these things come along and have this panacea-like nature.
Oh, yeah.
That seem like they're going to be solutions to large bodies of problems, and they're embraced by the culture, by the press, by the public, very quickly. Because, and what we suddenly was clear was that is so consistent with this Heideggerian story. And then when you look at nanotechnology, let's say, I think that's a clearer, more example.
Yes.
Because it has this great promise, and the government has put billions into it, and everybody's signing on board. And if you look at it really closely, what are the real...
And here we have an engineer and a biologist. Aren't we lucky to find out? Yeah, tell us. Go ahead.
No,
when you look at it, what do you see?
Well, I think that the pattern is interesting because it says that a lot of times we're so quick to embrace these because we want that thing. We want that kind of totalizing solution.
Yeah.
But in many cases it falls short because...
No, you're totally right about that. There are a lot more problems with stem cells than... That's quite right. It is seen as this kind of panacea. I mean, obviously, California putting $3 billion up, and on, that it's going to be somehow cure-all, and it won't be that.
You know, the naive story, maybe someone can help me with this, but I mean, the idea of what I understand, very coarsely of stem cells, is you just have a big jar of them, and you take them out with this, someone has a bad knee, a bad eye, you just... inject them into the places where they have trouble, and everything will get fixed out. I mean, that's the kind of myth, I think.
That's a myth, and that's very naive to think that way, of course.
And what's the nano myth?
The nano myth is that, you'll have like a jar of atoms. You'll pour some of them into this machine, and you'll put, tell it what you want, and it'll generate out, iPods or whatever.
Okay.
I want one. That's good. All right. We got to talk.
These are the myths.
I really believe.
I think this is really interesting because I don't think this is specific to our understanding of being. I think people have always been, whether you want to talk about oracles in Greece or in ancient Greece or, I think people have always been looking for these panaceas, it's not anything. I mean, now it often has to do more with technology just because that's what we have, but I don't necessarily think it's limited by any understanding of being. It seems to be an intrinsic human quality.
Let me say something. You get something next, but but that isn't what people were sort of interested in and all hyping about. I presume when the railroads came in, they didn't say, just look at all the things we can do with it. I mean, you can just get from one place to another. And I bet when electricity came in, they didn't think, gee, we can use it to make phonographs and movies. There wasn't no such thing, or elevators and motors. They just thought light. Oh, gosh, Edison has fixed it so everybody can have light at night. The idea that what was exciting should be something that will solve everybody's problems, all of them, and not just do one specific thing well. I don't know if that's if that was always what people looked for.
Yeah, I don't think I'm saying that people were always trying to optimize, which is what you were just explaining. I think more in terms of people are always looking to something to solve all of their problems is something that's always happened.
Something that solves all, I see, yes. Well, then we have to say something like that there's a kind of technology, a kind that will solve all their problems. There was always that too, you think? I mean, oracles are...
I don't necessarily think it was always technology,
Yeah.
but...
Oracles didn't do that, maybe. But anyway, I see what you think. I don't know. I mean, I can't make an argument for it right now. We have to think about it. It's a good question. Let me just state the question. How much is our current understanding of being technicity giving us a sense of a certain kind of solution to all of our problems by way of the flexibility of something that you can make? You can make a robot that will do anything. You can make a stem cell do anything. You can make the atoms do anything. That particular idea that it isn't just that you can solve your problems, but that one thing can solve all your problems because it's so versatile. Maybe. I'm just thinking now, in order, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
I thought that the Dreyfus thing about having this hyper flexibility is that when objects, when things no longer stand up over against this object, and they no longer have essential properties, they have this flexibility that we're talking about, and we're no longer subjects. It concerns the relationship between human beings and their work. And when we don't have any essential properties either.
Yeah, that's the next, you're good. You're getting ahead of me, but that's the right way to go. Yes. What is it for us to become standing reserve?
It also questions what are these resources for, and what is standing reserve for when we're no longer what we were.
That's whose desire. I mean, it was once to satisfy a subject's desires to have tourism, or to have light, or to have heat, and so forth. Now, what's it all for? Yes. Okay. Yes, Heidegger has an answer to that. But I'll just say it so you won't lose it. It's all just to stand by for further ordering. That's the new standing reserve. It doesn't ever come to an end. It just goes around with more and more manipulability and flexibility. That's his idea. That's his interesting idea. That's the part where he really gets onto something more than just being upset about the Rhine River being dammed up. He's got this idea. This is the crucial thing, that up to now there was some purpose in all this, even if it was hyper of messing up of the river with dams, or the Central Valley with monoculture and so forth. There was always some purpose. And now he thinks, really, now postmodern, I think we should call it, is technicity, is this business of ordering to stand by for further ordering, in his language. How do we, flexibility, I guess, may be the right way.
Well, I like overcoming.
Oh, constant overcoming, good. Okay, that's the Nietzsche phrase. Now, the next, yeah.
Things I'm happy about removing the beyond its nature and then calling it just like removal of nature. I really like that idea.
I see that's the next stage, you mean?
Yeah, I think that really captures like.
Okay, I'm happy with that. So constant overcoming. In here goes removal of nature.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So
He's unhappy.
Okay,
He's happy that.
Purpose, right? Also removal of nature
And
purpose?
yeah, removal of nature, and on the side of what used to be the object, we get rid of the nature. On the side of the subject, we get rid of the purpose, I think. Or no, never mind. Just nature and purpose. I haven't got the subjects yet.
And then the other thing is, what was it? Oh yeah. I think that to some extent, when you're talking about all these things with like technologies that didn't really pan out, they didn't really solve all the problems that we have. To some extent, some of the things that you mentioned are kind of really pessimistic views in my perception of things. And the other thing is that I also think that like people view certain advancements that we've had in like the last 100 years and stuff, and then they say, wow, that really did work out. I mean, if you take, for instance, before sort of viral strains and bacteria and stuff started resisting a lot, penicillin actually acted as a cure-all for all sorts of things for quite a while. And that was like a wonder drug, and like Prozac. I mean, a lot of people believed, and perhaps due to placebo effects, it actually acted as a wonder drug for depression for so you have all these things where like sometimes technology or whatever actually does pan out to provide something that really does solve everybody's problems due to, you know, its magical flexibility.
Well, maybe. I mean, one is it'll make new problems. That's her issue.
Yeah.
But I want to say on yours that there are cases. I think electricity is the most interesting one, where all of its promise and more was definitely filled out.
Mm-hmm.
But there are so much of these things. So you're giving examples where it looks like for a while they did it, and then they ran into some kind of self-generated limit. The penicillin and Prozac. So it's very hard to find. I don't think of any example besides electricity, which seems to just go on and on doing better and better things and not hurting anybody, except for the ones that get in the way of it.
It seems like electricity has its own self-imposed limits, though. I mean, we're doing all sorts of bad things to natural resources and all that. So
to get the electricity,
right?
Yeah, to make the atomic
and that's
plants.
The same thing with penicillin and what have you. I mean, it's like, you know, eventually it probably won't work out in perpetuity.
Okay, we register that. Yes, I think he's next, and then okay, go ahead.
I just want to kind of support her argument that this kind of panacea optimism is kind of a fundamental human thing. Because you look back like hundreds of years ago during the Enlightenment, in my opinion, one of the biggest cases of panacea optimism would be like the whole idea that science and rationality can solve all our problems. And I still think we have a lot of that optimism. And a lot of people don't anymore. A lot of people think that science is kind of the whole thing is kind of an overrated, overhyped panacea.
And that is a modern. The question is that was that your example could cut either way. You might say that is modernity, the Enlightenment. That's when they first got the idea that something like science or reason could solve all our problems. Otherwise, there were just sort of local solutions to local problems, and they may be. So you've sort of defined where modernity starts in that way. And then there's somebody.
I think along those lines, what we were saying before, we've always had this idea of, perhaps we always had this idea that there's a panacea that can save everything, but it wasn't until modernism that we actually had something where there was like a visible progress towards it. You know, so back in the Greeks they had the oracle, the idea that the oracle, could solve all their problems or whatever, but there was no like progression of better oracling. Whereas now we have this progression. Where we have. We see stem cells as being this great, panacea, but we're also seeing like progress in that direction.
We're demanding the progress.
We're seeing progress in things like nanotechnology. There's actually things being done, whereas that being a modern thing, in the past we had this desire for something, but there was no like progression towards it.
I just want to make one correction, at least it seems, what I know about in AI, there never was any progress. And the progress is part of the illusion. And whether we got it in nanotechnology or not, there'll be something done, of course. They managed to make computers barely able to understand you on the phone if you say in natural language, domestic or international, after a lot of silent calculation, it manages to usually get it right. I mean, something was done, but not the progress that people so much expected that they sort of convinced themselves, and the media, and then everybody, that they were making progress. It's not clear that they were, and I don't know we don't know yet in nanotechnology. There's certainly no progress yet in that case.
But the idea being that even if there is whether or not there's actual progress, or we actually get that panacea, I think the perception of there being progress is something that is what differentiates modern from previous times.
Okay, good. I like that.
The idea of there being progress was in the past. There was always a hope for a panacea.
Right.
Now we have this idea that there's progress.
Okay, as long as you put it the perception, or even maybe the illusion that there's being progress, that is modern, I bet. That is that everything is bound to get better and better, and the Enlightenment was the beginning of it. Sonny, are you next? I think you might be. Go ahead. Yeah, the guy in the back. You, yeah. When you talk louder, this room is so.
The difference between modern and postmodern, between what was before the understanding of being more under the idea of control. Because if you think about it, of, understanding God, try to understand your place on earth. But in either case, it's not really, you don't have control over it at all. It's more of, well, you try to understand it, and maybe you'll pray to God and something will happen. But once you reach modernity, it's kind of more of, well, let's try to understand science. And from that, maybe humans gain understanding that, well, what if we use this understanding to control the world around us? From there, it turns into things of, well, what if we use science to treat ourselves as resources such as genetic engineering, stem cell research, etc. And then from that point, it becomes socialized. So I kind of view it as although we might have always searched for something to make our lives better, because obviously every human being wants that, after you reach the modern period, because technology itself, I don't know, I guess there's a way to quantify things. It's instead of leaving things into the hands of fate or trying to understand things as themselves, you're trying to quantify things, and then that themselves is kind of what Heidegger's whole point of everything turns into resources, and then after that point, you yourself.
I mean, that's not called resources, what they say.
Yeah, standing.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's got to do with the securing, dominating, controlling. What was it? Regulating and securing. Where was that? We ought to really put that up there.
Controlling, that's sort of in here. Regulating.
Yeah. Oh, good. Right. Regulating and controlling.
Regulating.
Yeah. That's the first and a very important step. And it's
nature, right, or God.
Yeah. Well, we up to modern, we weren't doing all this regulating and controlling. We were receivers of whatever nature was offering in Aristotle or God was offering the Christians. The real crucial move to modernity, I think Heidegger's got that right, is starting here with the regulating and controlling and going on to the expediting. He's got that much, and that's good. But we've gone further than that now, and that's what we were discussing when we were discussing the stem cells and AI and all that. And this flexibility, this belief that somehow we've got something that can be everything to everybody and solve everything, and that's more than regulating and controlling and dominating. That's, I don't know what to say yet. I don't have a word for it. Innovating, no, that's not good enough. I don't know. But anybody else before? Because I want to come back to this and sort of before time is up, just so you can put in the last piece, and then you can think about it in after that. Let me see now. I just got to this stage in which everything gets turned into flexibility, and every new possibility. That's this ordering for the sake of ordering. Up to with Aristotle, as he mentions, the possibilities were fixed, the potentialities, and even with Taylor, I mean, you found out a person's one capacity. You found out the one best way of doing things, and that was fixed. Now we get this idea of manipulating everything, pure flexibility, ordering and reordering for its own sake, and now we have to figure out what that looks like. We did discuss on the side of the stuff what it looks like: AI, genetic engineering, nanotech, stem cells. But now, what is it to say that we become standing reserve? That's the piece where you started it, and it's the missing piece, because Heidegger thinks that whatever it was monstrous about the river is not nearly as monstrous and dangerous as what happens when technicity takes us over, and we, instead of becoming the orderers of nature, and we become just part of the whole ordering of everything. What does that look like? Well, I made some notes of what it looks like to at least make something beyond efficiency what's important. I think efficiency isn't where it's at anymore. I think the buzzword in business, where we'll start where Taylor was, is entrepreneurship. That's what people think is going to solve everything, not efficiency. If you ask what makes a country really going to be a successful, dominating country, it's entrepreneurial. That means that it's not just efficiency and productivity, but it's creativity. The entrepreneurs supposedly see, sort of like Jobs, see whole new interesting products, whole new ways of doing things. And it's so different to invent the iPod or buy Pixar or whatever, who knows what Jobs is up to, or invent the personal computer and the desktop interface, or he stole it, but I mean, saw that it was important. Anyway, all these things that Jobs can do is not efficient and it's not static. He just does one of these things and then he sells Pixar, he leaves the company behind, that's already done, and that's now for us the most exciting thing. Another version of it, I gather, is something called hot groups, which I don't know much about. There was a book called The Soul of the New Machine about, 15 years ago now, about the making of a computer operating system. But what was interesting about it was the company got together a bunch of people who formed a group just long enough, each of them using their talents, to make this operating system, and then dissolve them, and they became, each of them, part of some other group in the company. The idea, in other words, that production lines and one best way isn't where it's at, but how to get a group together just enough to solve some problem, and then break it up into other groups that are different and have different problems. That does look like a new way of looking at business. And how will it affect people? Well, everybody, I talked about this, is going to have something like a dozen different jobs in their life, and the point isn't to find their one skill, the way Taylor tried to do it, but they have to somehow get a kind of meta skill, a skill to stand by, to be whatever kind of worker is needed. And a versatility and adaptability goes down in this picture at the bottom, and we become standing reserves too. I don't know how you teach people to become versatile and adaptable, but I know that there are people who realize that we've lost something.
Well, if you fire them regularly, they will be.
What?
If you fire them regularly, they will become natural.
Yeah, they'll have to, won't they?
Yeah.
Yes, well, that might be part of it. So, and people complain that nowadays, once upon a time there were guilds and traditions and quality, and people develop their skill through a lifetime, and now that you've got no life plan and no character, if you want to put it that way, where you're developing your own personal character. A book came about 10 years ago called The Corrosion of Character was complaining about this, and the people who answered him said, well, who cares about character? The main thing is to be innovative, to constantly have new ideas, new skills, new worlds. And Nietzsche is he's so far ahead of his time. He's the hero of that. I just marked in the Gay Science a few places. There's this little conversation. A says, do I still understand you well? You are seeking. You are seeking your nook, your star. And the answer is, I'm no seeker. I want to create for myself a sun, S-U-N, of my own. I mean, that's the switch to the entrepreneur way of thinking. Or here's another one. We should become who we are. Human beings who are new, unique, incomparable, who give themselves laws, who create themselves. That's the new, really new postmodern understanding of who we are. And then I found one where Nietzsche says it's Americans who do this most. He starts with the Athenians. He says the Athenian faith that first becomes noticeable in the Periclean age, the faith of the Americans today, is more and more becoming the faith of Europe as well. The individual becomes convinced that he can do just about everything, can manage almost any role, and everybody experiments with himself, improves, makes new experiments, enjoys his experiments, and nature becomes art. That's pretty neat. I mean, he writes so well, and he is so brilliant. I mean, this is all new ideas that he's got there. And
in some sense, it brings it back to the Greeks, though, because he's actually quoting Pindar when he talks about become who you are.
Yeah.
And it seems like
he thinks the Athenians had it at one moment. Well, I don't know. Heidegger would certainly have to tell a story about some difference between the Athenians and the Americans, which Nietzsche doesn't make. If Heidegger is right, they couldn't have had the same everything's up for grabs, and the more flexible, the better in Greece. More that everyone would have make a new world, a new sun, entrepreneurial, so forth. There's some difference.
But the idea of being an all-arounder is very much integral to the ancient Greek idea of excellence.
That's
which
right.
is not.
That's right.
It's
There
not
is this
so different.
being all around, but
there's only one mode of revealing in this Americanist view, right? In that
there's only one mode of
there's multiple.
there's only one mode of revealing at any given age. At least Heidegger thinks. It's just that the flexibility of the Athenian, which was something he prided himself on, and that he could do sort of anything, take on any role, sounds very postmodern. I don't know what to say about that. Do you have anything to say about that? I'm trying to figure out, because if Heidegger is right, if we could get him here and ask him, he better have a distinction there. There's a different mode of revealing that's going on in Athens. I'm sure.
Perhaps what the Athenians were talking about is character, and you have a loss of character in the modern.
I suppose they had character, although even that they seem to be...
The Athenians, I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Aristotle, character is a very important part of the rhetoric.
Ah, well, that's interesting. Yes.
Yeah, and the Nicomachean Methods. Character is very important.
So they admired character. Okay, well, that's interesting.
But character had this excellence that he's talking about.
They could do a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's a lot of things. The typical one is Alcibiades. He could do several things. And he could be a general, and he could be a politician. But I think the Nietzsche picture is you can just keep doing new things and new things and new things. You've got this ability that's this entrepreneurial, what's another word for this? Innovative. Innovative wasn't so much. They didn't want to have, that's it, I got it.
No.
They didn't want to have new roles. They were perfectly happy if they could do the political role and the general role and maybe the poet role and the philosopher role. If that's a lot, but Plato could do it, maybe. Anyway, but we want to invent new roles, according to Nietzsche. That's what gets credit. I mean, so Jobs isn't just playing a whole lot of previous roles. He's supposed to invent new ways of running a business. That's the idea. Okay, so that's what would become of us. And now the question is, and I leave you with this one, and what's wrong with that? I'd like to be Steve Jobs. That sounds like a fun way to be. And what is somebody like that supposed to be losing, according to Heidegger? There's a brief hint at the end. At the very end, I read it before because it's so brief and totally mysterious, that we have to count on the saving power of the simple things. What does he think we have to be saved from, and how does he think the little things he talks about on 33 can do it? Well, we're going to read later, we're going to read Borgmann and we're going to read Heidegger on the thing, and Heidegger's going to tell us what he thinks constant overcoming lacks, and why, and what simple things are, and why they would fix it. Right now, I don't think we are in any position to say why it isn't a good thing to be a postmodern person as a totally innovative person with new sons and new families and new jobs and new everything all the time. So I'm going to stop with that. I could try to tell you already the answer, but that would seem I would only sound silly. But anyway, we'll get there. You want to say anything?
I wanted to go back to this for one second, because I did something behind your back while you were talking, and I want to make sure you're okay. Nurturing, I like just the structure of these, always having these gerunds out there. Nurturing and then using, in the sense that there's some transformation into using things.
Yeah.
So they're
to satisfy our desires. The subject has a bunch of desires, and the object gets used is like a commodity that will satisfy that desire. Yeah.
Okay. Good. And then the challenging is expediting, which challenging is just being able to control it. Expediting is to maximally control it or optimize that. Hyper expediting is where you actually push it beyond its optimal point to some new level. And then this 5 is this constant overcoming, which is where it's ultimately flexible and available and
unbounded or something.
Unbounded, yeah. It's just
Put innovating at the bottom. So, by the way, it sounds when we put it this way, I didn't realize I was doing this, but I'm not really going along with Heidegger that when we become standing reserve, we get taken up in the ordering and standing by only for more ordering. I mean, that's somehow, something's right about it. The flexibility's in there, the availability's in there, but he doesn't have enough emphasis on this Nietzschean constant overcoming. So standing by for more ordering. I think what I want to say is standing by for new ordering, the innovative new stuff. Does he have a feel for that? Mm-hmm. Not really. And that's where it's at, I think. That's the hot group and the entrepreneurial idea, is that it's always got to be new ordering. And he got as far as flexibility, but he didn't get to constant overcoming, which is constant innovating, I think, which is, I think, where we're at. And that, if anything is postmodern, that's what's postmodern, I think.
And you're saying the postmodern is at 5. I mean, that's where you're
that's
clearly...
Right. Let's draw a line across there. Okay. Say that's where we get really clearly postmodern. And let's draw a line across here. That's where we get more clearly modern.
Well, that's very helpful.
That's helpful. Okay. Thanks to you all. We got somewhere, I think. I was more amused when I was last year I made the two of them now. I think that's good. I think the only two words. I really another meeting? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I know. You have the website. I update the website every week, so it always changes. So we printed it out like 3 weeks ago.
No, I know there's a part of me you can't do it. Okay. Friday, 5 to 6. Good.
I have a quick thing to talk about. They were way back in the back of the room, so I don't know.
Let's leave them up here, I guess. You think they belong to somebody?
No, they don't really look like it.